Hello, this is Group 5, discussion number 5. Today we're talking about how organizations can prepare leaders at all levels to respond to crisis, and also considering the communication in the BP oil spill. All right, what'd you guys see? Well, I can start.
Awkward silence. We're together, no thoughts.
So, did you guys have the opportunity to watch the BP video?
I haven't finished it.
That was a long one.
Same. Yeah. I started it. I'm like 25 minutes in, but it's just a longer video than I first sat down. I was like, yeah, watch it real quick. It wasn't
exactly.
Well, I thought there was a lot of good information, even if you just watched a little bit of it. Like, I definitely didn't know all that about BP. I guess I just live under a rock because, I mean, I was definitely an adult and alive during all of those events, but I guess I just didn't follow it much. But I thought it was really interesting learning about their organization because it seemed like the issue in itself was that the company hadn't created a culture where safety was important. It seemed like that was a reoccurring theme. And one of the things that I liked is how they called like the communication that BP had as political theater, and that they, you know, were responding, but like what they were saying doesn't necessarily align with their actions. What did you think?
Something that I took away from it, or that I thought was interesting, was there was a moment they talked about, I think it was that Texas plant, and they were trying to cut costs. And the guy who was speaking said something to the effect of, it starts as a whisper at the top, but it's a shout at the bottom. And that really resonated to me, working in a bigger corporation where sometimes the communication can change as it's going through that whole like telephone of people. An example would be, the company looks at managing cost controllables a little bit better, but when it trickles down to us in operations, they're trying to cut labor, and how different of a messaging that is compared to managing your cost controllables. And how just the connotation of, we're trying to cut labor, and how that really negatively can kind of infiltrate other aspects. So I just kind of really related to that whole messaging when they talked about it in Texas of they're trying to, save costs, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, we don't have to fix machines anymore. So.
Yeah, I agree that it did seem like really profits were the only thing they were concerned about, and it was more like, well, like I think one of the examples was like something in the Texas plant was going to cost like $150 million, but they were like, well, we'd rather save that right now and potentially have a larger cost later. Where it's like, if you're looking at the larger picture, like how much money did it cost them to not fix that? When you consider like all of the lawsuits that they had, all of the negative press, things like that, it probably costs a lot more in the long run to save that money up front. And I think that's something that a lot of corporations struggle with, like our organization included. And sometimes it's like, well, this quarter we need to deliver. We'll figure out next quarter when next quarter happens.
And another thing about them, it's just like how they handled it afterwards, and I also recall this from years ago. They're blaming like contract workers or contract companies and not taking like any fault. Okay, and now I don't remember because I watched part of this video and then I fell asleep. I don't remember if I heard this in a video or from somewhere else, but it was the BP CEO or whoever was in charge at the time, was on vacation when it happened, right? Do you guys recall that? And like he didn't leave his vacation. He
I
like
don't remember that, but so you
okay,
might
and
have
I
read it from
remember it from somewhere else. Yeah.
maybe our textbook. I think they talked about it.
Okay. I'm like everything's merging together now. Um, Instead of like flying back and like having like a press release regarding it, he like stayed on vacation. Someone came interviewed him while he was on vacation about this whole incident. So like he had no like concern really.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. It was poorly handled at all levels.
Extremely, yeah.
What about you, Bobby? Did you have the opportunity to look into the incident at all?
I started to watch a little bit of it, but I haven't gotten too far into it. But I do agree with like, and maybe not about BP specifically, but I do think that cost usually does lead to these types of, or like when you're trying to cut costs and you're trying to cut labor, for a lot of companies, it can lead to unethical maybe decisions that are being made. Like the company I work for, like it's a great company to work for, but we have like sensors like for your doors, like so you don't steal stuff like on the sensor tags, and just the cost for that to get those fixed is apparently too much for them to invest the money in. So, and it's been like that since I've been there for 2 years, and you just have to look at where you're losing in theft. That money could be put towards labor. It could be put towards fixing the sensor machines. So it's just really, I think that is a driving force, is cutting down costs, and it does issues.
But I think I think it's up to the leadership to ensure that the communication, because every company's going to have to cut costs, right, or manage, their cost control rules. But I think it's how they deliver that communication that will impact the way their followers receive it, in terms of whether to stay, have the integrity to not make the unethical choices, whether they're going to control their costs the right way. Yeah.
I agree with you that it comes up to that senior leadership. Like that was something that I thought was interesting in the BP situation, was like they talked about how after the first couple of incidents, they removed the CEO, and then a new CEO came into play, and he like had all this communication where he's like, we're focusing on safety, we're going to make this so much better. But then like he was getting, like their stock started dropping, and he was getting a lot of pressure to, make the stock prices go back up. You need to cut costs, things like that. And so like all of his vision like went to the wind in order to get the stock prices to go back up. Yeah. And I think that's something that, doesn't just happen, in a big oil company. It happens everywhere. And you need like a leader in those positions where they are ethical and strong enough in their values that they'll stand up to their board. Like something, it makes me kind of proud to work at Starbucks is like we recently had an incident where our CEO, he had made a comment and it caused our stock to like tank kind of overnight. And like he didn't back down and like released a press statement. Well, not a press statement, but he like released an internal statement. And like one of the comments that he made in there was that our stock price does not define us. Like the stock may be volatile in, the next coming months, but just have faith that if we do the right thing, it's going to get better. And I thought that, that's really brave. It's really hard for a CEO to say like our stock price doesn't define us, because for the majority of companies it does.
Yeah.
So it just gave me a lot of confidence in like my senior leadership. Well then, what do you guys think about like how organizations can prepare leaders at all levels to respond in crisis?
I loved the Wheel of Crisis. Did anyone like get a kick out of that?
Yeah.
Where it's like think of all like they put all the crisis on a wheel and you take a spin
Yeah.
and then you brainstorm all these different possibilities. Like I just thought that was like a really kind of fun way to think about crisis.
Agree. I think that's kind of like the first step, right? Is like what do they say? Recognize the danger signs and look for trouble. Like you have to just acknowledge that it's gonna happen. So like let's figure out what we're gonna do when it happens.
Yeah.
The other one I loved was internal assassins. Like sounds kind of fun.
Oh,
Like, figure out
yeah.
how to sabotage us. Yeah.
And it's like, I think training is extremely important. I know that can't be applied to all crises, but like in like the public type of sector or like something happened, like even a bad name. Sorry, I can't gather my thoughts. If there's like a rumor going around about your company, how they like extinguish that instantly. That type of training can help with situations like that, but I'm not sure if that could be applied to all types of crises.
Well, I agree that like training is necessary. Like not necessarily for all types, but I think let me flip to the 10 types in the book. But like definitely for like natural disasters, like to have a plan in place. And I think most places you have to like that's part of your orientation is that you like train on what you do in those kind of situations. Terrorist attack as well. Human resources. I feel like that's normally stuff that's in orientation.
Another thing I like from the book is like learning from past mistakes. I think that's really like a good point. You can learn from people, like other people's failures and mistakes. So, or like in this case, crises and how they were handled and what you should do and what you shouldn't do.
Definitely. What do you think, Bobby? How can we prepare leaders?
I think it's like I said, like you guys said. I think it's a lot about training, and I also think it's about acknowledging things. Like for instance, when I worked at Nordstrom a few years ago, maybe somewhere between 5 and 10 years ago, I was at I think I was at Fashion Island in Newport Beach, but there was a shooting in the Nordstrom in Chicago, actually in downtown, and one of the salespeople was actually killed. So Nordstrom put out a statement immediately to all the stores, letting them know about the situation, what happened, and that's like we'd always done drills before and learning how to deal with these types of situations if they come about, but it was addressed again, and it's continually addressed in the way that they would evolve and change the way that we learned these different types of scenarios. It was really great. That's probably the only company that I worked for that addressed a lot of the crises on this list.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, it was rough. But.
Yeah. I think you bring up a good point too when you talk about like the immediate communication. Like obviously internally that's important so that like the employees feel safe. But I think it's also important to have like your crisis management plan and have that the person who's supposed to communicate with the media identified so that like they can understand like their role and make sure that they're properly communicating. I liked how it said like they should never say no comment. You know, if they we don't have enough information, I'll let you know when we do.
And I also do Bobby about acknowledging, and like the example in the book, which I had no idea like ever existed, was about Procter and Gamble. Did you guys recall reading that? But how they're linked to like satanic cults, and then it's like, no, we're not. And they were flooded with calls regarding it and like bad PR relating to it. And never really did anything about it.
Yeah, it's crazy. Who is the company where it said that like people died because there was cyanide in their pills? Like,
Is it Procter? No, it's whoever makes Tylenol. Who owns that? Johnson & Johnson, Procter and Gamble?
Probably Johnson & Johnson.
Johnson & Johnson. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but that was one where I was like, I guess, they handled that situation pretty well because I've never heard of that.
I never heard of it either. And it said like their price, like they sold more time after they handled it or something. Like I don't know. I would buy it after that. Sorry, Bobby. I think I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No, you're okay.
It's a little
I
delay on my
have no
computer.
idea what you're saying. There's like a weird echo.
Oh yeah. Apologies.
That's okay. No, but yeah, like I said, I really think it's just the acknowledgement is the biggest piece,
Mhm.
and then just taking a proactive stance on training with people is really what I think is the most important part in addressing these things. Because a lot of times people have questions, people are scared, people don't know what's happening, and if they're looking to you as their leader and you don't know what to do and you haven't communicated like the proper response or actions, I think that's where it gets pretty difficult to work in that situation.
Yeah, I agree.
I would also say that, I think that leaders have a responsibility to try to, prevent the crisis from occurring in the first place. So, going back to the BP example, it seemed like a lot of their employees were telling them the issues and they just blew it off and didn't take them seriously. So I think as leaders, we have a responsibility to listen to our subordinates and take any concerns seriously. So that if there is a problem, we can address it before it becomes a huge crisis.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed, for sure.
All right. Well, we are just about out of time. Do you guys have any other final thoughts before we stop our broadcast?
No.
I'm good.
All right. Well, thank you guys for our final discussion.
Oh yeah, thank you. Then we'll be in touch regarding the project soon.
Will do.
Yep.
Bye.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Have a nice day.